The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty training grounds at Camp Pendleton, California. Staff Sergeant Mike Rodriguez adjusted his protective eyewear and checked his M4 Carbine 1 final time before the day's marksmanship training began. The familiar weight of the rifle felt comfortable in his experienced hands as he prepared to demonstrate proper shooting techniques to a group of new recruits who had arrived just weeks earlier. Rodriguez had been a Marine for 12 years, and marksmanship instruction had become second nature to him. He had served 2 tours in Afghanistan and 1 in Iraq, where his shooting skills had saved lives on multiple occasions. His reputation as one of the best marksmen in his unit was well-earned, built through countless hours of practice and real-world experience in high-pressure situations. The group of recruits gathered around the firing line, their faces showing a mixture of nervousness and excitement. Among them stood Sarah Chen, a 22-year-old from San Francisco who had enlisted just 4 months earlier. Unlike many of her fellow recruits who came from military families or had prior shooting experience, Sarah had never held a firearm before joining the Marines. Her background was in computer science, and she had worked as a software developer before deciding to serve her country. Sarah's decision to join the Marines had surprised everyone who knew her. Friends and family had always seen her as the quiet, intellectual type who preferred solving coding problems to physical challenges. She was petite at 5'4" and weighed barely 120 pounds, making her seem unlikely Marine material to casual observers. However, beneath her reserved exterior lay a determination and focus that would soon become apparent. The training facility buzzed with activity as instructors prepared different shooting stations. The main rifle range stretched out before them, with targets positioned at various distances from 100 to 500 yards. The closer targets were used for basic marksmanship training, while the distant ones challenged even experienced shooters. A slight breeze moved across the range, creating variables that skilled marksmen learned to account for in their calculations. Rodriguez began his demonstration by explaining the fundamentals of marksmanship. His voice carried clearly across the group as he discussed breathing techniques, sight alignment, and trigger control. The recruits listened intently, taking mental notes of every detail. Sarah found herself particularly absorbed in the technical aspects of shooting, approaching it with the same analytical mindset she had applied to programming. As Rodriguez prepared to fire his first demonstration shots, he noticed Sarah watching with unusual intensity. While other recruits seemed focused on the social aspects of training or appeared intimidated by the weapons, she studied every movement with scientific precision. Her eyes tracked his hand positioning, his stance, and the way he controlled his breathing before each shot. The first series of demonstration shots rang out across the range. Rodriguez's targets showed tight groupings that impressed even the other instructors present. He made it look effortless, placing shot after shot exactly where he intended. The recruits applauded, and several made comments about hoping to shoot half as well someday. During a break in the demonstration, Rodriguez approached Sarah, who was examining one of the practice rifles with curious attention. She was running her fingers along the barrel and studying the sight system with the same concentration she might have applied to debugging complex code. "First time handling a rifle, Chen?" Rodriguez asked, noting her name tape. Sarah looked up and nodded. "Yes, Staff Sergeant. I'm trying to understand the mechanical principles involved. It seems like there are multiple variables that need to be calculated simultaneously." Rodriguez was intrigued by her analytical approach. Most recruits were either excited about the power of the weapon or nervous about handling it safely. Sarah seemed to view it as an engineering problem to be solved. "You're right about the variables," Rodriguez replied. "Wind, speed, and direction, distance to target, ammunition characteristics, breathing rhythm, heart rate. Experienced shooters learn to process all of that almost instinctively." Sarah nodded thoughtfully, like developing muscle memory for complex algorithms. The conscious mind establishes the pattern, then the subconscious executes it automatically. Her comparison caught Rodriguez's attention. He had never heard anyone describe marksmanship in programming terms before, but the analogy made sense. Both required precise inputs to achieve consistent outputs, and both improved through repetitive practice that eventually became automatic. As the training session continued, Rodriguez found himself watching Sarah more closely. When it came time for the recruits to practice with training rifles, she approached the firing line with calm confidence rather than the anxiety most newcomers displayed. Her stance was awkward at first, but she quickly adjusted based on the instructions she had received. The other recruits struggled with basic concepts like sight alignment and trigger control. Some flinched at the sound of gunfire, throwing off their accuracy. Others rushed their shots, eager to see results rather than focusing on proper technique. Sarah, however, took her time with each shot, treating it like a calculation that needed to be solved correctly. Her first few shots were wide of the target, which was expected for someone with no prior experience. But Rodriguez noticed something unusual in her approach. Instead of becoming frustrated or trying to rush improvement, she analyzed each miss carefully. She would examine the target through binoculars, then make small adjustments to her technique before the next shot. By her 10th shot, Sarah was hitting the target consistently. By her 20th, she was approaching the center ring. Other instructors began to notice the quiet recruit, who was progressing faster than anyone had seen before. Her improvement curve was so steep it seemed almost impossible. Rodriguez decided to move Sarah to more challenging distances to see if her early success was just beginner's luck. At 200 yards, her shots remained accurate. At 300 yards, she continued hitting her intended targets. Other recruits were still struggling to hit anything at 100 yards, but Sarah seemed to adapt to each new challenge with remarkable ease. The breakthrough moment came when Rodriguez decided to test her abilities more seriously. He had been joking with another instructor about Sarah's rapid progress when he made an offhand comment that would change everything. "I bet she couldn't handle a real challenge," he said, not meaning to be dismissive but simply expressing surprise at her unusual talent. Sarah, who had been cleaning her practice rifle nearby, looked up. "What kind of challenge, Staff Sergeant?" Rodriguez paused, realizing she had overheard his comment. He hadn't intended to put her on the spot, but now several other recruits and instructors were listening to the conversation. The training environment often involved friendly competition, and challenges were common ways to motivate learning. "Well," Rodriguez said, thinking quickly, "most recruits are happy if they can hit 10 targets in a row at 100 yards. Even experienced Marines find it challenging to maintain perfect accuracy over long strings of fire." Sarah set down her cleaning supplies and looked toward the targets. How many targets would constitute a real challenge? The question surprised Rodriguez. Most recruits would have backed down or made excuses about their limited experience. Sarah seemed genuinely curious about pushing her abilities further. "I suppose if someone could hit 50 targets in a row without a miss, that would be impressive for anyone," Rodriguez replied, thinking he was setting an impossibly high standard for a recruit with less than a day of shooting experience. "What about 100? Sarah asked quietly. The conversation suddenly became much more serious. Rodriguez looked at Sarah carefully, trying to determine if she was joking or if she truly believed she could achieve such a feat. 100 consecutive hits would be remarkable for a seasoned Marine, let alone a recruit who had never fired a weapon before today. Other instructors had gathered around, drawn by the unusual nature of the conversation. Hitting 100 consecutive targets required not just accuracy, but also incredible consistency and mental focus. It was the kind of achievement that would be remembered and talked about for years. Rodriguez felt the weight of the moment. He could deflect the challenge or make light of it, but something in Sarah's demeanor suggested she was completely serious. Her calm confidence was unlike anything he had seen in a new recruit. "Chen," he said carefully, "hitting 100 targets in a row is something most Marines never achieve in their entire careers. Are you certain you want to attempt something like that?" Sarah considered the question for several long moments. The range had grown quieter as other training activities paused, and more people became aware of the conversation taking place. She seemed to be running calculations in her mind, weighing variables and possibilities. Finally, she nodded. "I'd like to try, Staff Sergeant." Rodriguez realized that what had started as casual conversation was about to become something much more significant. Word was already spreading among the instructors and other trainees about the challenge that had been proposed. Some seemed skeptical that a new recruit would even attempt such a feat, while others were curious to see what would happen. The atmosphere on the range began to shift from routine training to something approaching a formal competition. Additional instructors arrived to observe, and even some Marines from other units came to watch what was being described as an unprecedented challenge for a recruit. Rodriguez found himself in an unexpected position. He had inadvertently created a situation that was drawing attention from across the base. The challenge had taken on a life of its own, and backing down now would disappoint the growing crowd of observers. As preparations began for Sarah's attempt, Rodriguez wondered if he had made a mistake. Setting up a recruit for potential failure in front of a large audience could be damaging to her confidence and future development. On the other hand, her calm demeanor and rapid improvement suggested she might be capable of more than anyone had imagined. The stage was set for what would become one of the most talked-about shooting demonstrations in Camp Pendleton's history, though no one present could have predicted just how extraordinary the results would be. Word of Sarah's challenge spread through Camp Pendleton faster than wildfire. Marines had a way of communicating about unusual events, and the prospect of watching a recruit attempt 100 consecutive target hits was too intriguing to ignore. By the time Rodriguez finished setting up the formal shooting station, a crowd of nearly 50 people had gathered around the range. Colonel James Mitchell, the base commander, heard about the challenge during his afternoon briefing and decided to observe personally. He had seen many remarkable demonstrations of marksmanship during his 25-year career, but the idea of a recruit with no prior shooting experience attempting such a feat was unprecedented. His presence added an official weight to what had started as casual conversation. Sarah seemed oblivious to the attention she was attracting. While other recruits might have been nervous or excited about performing in front of so many senior Marines, she remained focused on preparing for the challenge. She spent several minutes examining the rifle Rodriguez had selected for her use, checking the sight alignment and familiarizing herself with its specific characteristics. The weapon chosen for the attempt was a standard M4 carbine, identical to those used throughout the Marine Corps. Rodriguez had selected it specifically because it represented the equipment Sarah would use throughout her military career, rather than a specialized competition rifle that might give artificial advantages. The ammunition was also standard issue, eliminating any variables that might make the challenge easier or more difficult than normal shooting conditions. Master Sergeant Lisa Thompson, the senior marksmanship instructor at Camp Pendleton, approached Rodriguez with concerns about the challenge. She had trained thousands of Marines over her career and had never seen a recruit attempt anything this ambitious during basic training. "Mike, are you sure about this?" Thompson asked quietly. "If she fails spectacularly in front of all these people, it could destroy her confidence for the rest of her career." Rodriguez understood Thompson's concerns, but he had observed something unusual in Sarah's approach to shooting. Her analytical mindset and rapid improvement suggested she might possess natural abilities that were rarely seen. Still, the pressure of performing in front of a large audience could affect even experienced shooters. "She asked for the challenge, Lisa," Rodriguez replied. "I've never seen a recruit progress as quickly as she has today. There's something different about the way she approaches this." Thompson nodded but remained skeptical. In her experience, natural talent could only take someone so far without extensive practice and experience. The mental pressure of attempting 100 consecutive hits in front of a crowd would challenge even seasoned competitors. Sarah finished her equipment check and requested a few practice shots to familiarize herself with the specific rifle she would be using. Rodriguez agreed, understanding that consistency required developing a feel for each individual weapon. Even identical rifles could have subtle differences that affected accuracy. Her practice shots demonstrated the same steady improvement that had characterized her earlier shooting. The first shot was slightly off-center, but subsequent shots moved progressively closer to the bullseye. By her fifth practice shot, she was hitting exactly where she aimed with remarkable consistency. Lieutenant Colonel Patricia Reeves, who served as the base's training officer, joined the growing crowd of observers. She had heard reports of the unusual challenge and wanted to witness it personally. Reeves had been instrumental in developing updated marksmanship training programs and was always interested in observing exceptional performance. As the formal attempt began, Rodriguez established the rules that would govern the challenge. Sarah would fire at targets positioned at 100 yards, which was considered a reasonable distance for demonstrating accuracy without making the task impossible. Each shot would be evaluated immediately, and any miss would end the attempt. There would be no time limit, allowing Sarah to take as much time as needed for each shot. The first target was placed, and Sarah took her position at the firing line. The range fell silent except for the distant sounds of other training activities. Even those seemed to quiet as word spread about what was taking place. Sarah's first official shot struck the center ring of the target, earning murmurs of approval from the watching crowd. Rodriguez called out hit number 1 and prepared the next target. Her breathing was controlled and steady, showing no signs of nervousness despite the attention focused on her. The second shot followed quickly again, finding its mark in the center of the target. Rodriguez began to realize that what he had initially thought might be beginner's luck was actually the result of a rare combination of natural ability and analytical thinking that allowed Sarah to process the variables of marksmanship with unusual efficiency. By the 10th consecutive hit, the crowd had grown completely silent except for Rodriguez's count and the sound of each shot. Observers began to understand they were witnessing something exceptional. Even experienced Marines rarely achieved such consistency under pressure. Sarah's technique remained unchanged as the count increased. Each shot followed the same deliberate process: sight alignment, breathing control, trigger squeeze, and follow-through. Her movements seemed almost mechanical in their precision, but Rodriguez could see the intense concentration required to maintain such consistency. At 20 consecutive hits, Colonel Mitchell stepped closer to observe Sarah's technique directly. He had commanded units in multiple combat zones and understood the difficulty of maintaining accuracy under pressure. The recruit's performance was unlike anything he had seen from someone with her limited experience. The crowd continued to grow as word spread throughout the base. Marines finished their training activities and hurried to the rifle range to witness what was being described as an unprecedented demonstration. Some brought cameras to document the event, understanding they might be watching history in the making. Sarah seemed unaffected by the increasing attention. Her focus remained entirely on the technical aspects of each shot. Rodriguez noticed that she had developed a rhythm that helped maintain consistency, treating each shot as an identical problem to be solved rather than allowing the cumulative pressure to build. At 30 consecutive hits, Master Sergeant Thompson began to reconsider her earlier skepticism. She had trained competition shooters who struggled to maintain such consistency during formal matches. Sarah's performance was becoming something beyond mere natural talent. The ammunition supply required careful management as the count increased. Each round was inspected to ensure consistency, eliminating any variables that might affect accuracy through no fault of the shooter. Rodriguez coordinated with the armory to ensure a steady supply of identical ammunition throughout the attempt. By the 40th consecutive hit, observers began to realize they were witnessing something that would be remembered long after Sarah completed her training at Camp Pendleton. Cell phones appeared as Marines began recording portions of the demonstration, understanding that few people would believe their descriptions without visual evidence. Sarah's mental state remained remarkably stable as the count increased. Where most shooters would begin to feel pressure and potentially start making mistakes, she seemed to enter a zone of complete concentration that blocked out external distractions. Her analytical approach was proving perfectly suited to the repetitive nature of the challenge. At 50 consecutive hits, Rodriguez realized the challenge had evolved beyond anything he had initially imagined. The halfway point to Sarah's goal had been reached, but rather than showing signs of fatigue or decreased accuracy, her performance remained as consistent as it had been from the beginning. Lieutenant Colonel Reeves began taking detailed notes about Sarah's technique and mental approach. Such exceptional performance needed to be studied and potentially incorporated into future training programs. If the methods that worked for Sarah could be taught to other Marines, it might revolutionize marksmanship instruction throughout the Corps. The crowd had grown to include Marines from multiple units, as well as civilian contractors and family members who happened to be on base. Word of the demonstration had spread beyond the immediate training area, drawing observers who understood they were witnessing something extraordinary. At 60 consecutive hits, Sarah paused for the first time since beginning the challenge. Rodriguez initially worried that she might be experiencing fatigue or loss of concentration, but she simply requested a brief moment to check her equipment and ensure everything remained in optimal condition. Her attention to detail impressed the observing instructors. Rather than rushing through the shots to complete the challenge, Sarah maintained the same careful approach that had characterized her performance from the beginning. Each shot received the same level of preparation and focus. The pause lasted only 2 minutes before Sarah indicated she was ready to continue. The 61st shot struck the target center with the same precision that had marked her previous attempts. The crowd remained silent, understanding that any distraction could potentially affect her concentration. By 70 consecutive hits, even the most skeptical observers had to acknowledge they were witnessing exceptional marksmanship. Sarah had already surpassed what most Marines achieved in their entire careers, and she showed no signs of slowing down or losing accuracy. Rodriguez found himself in uncharted territory as an instructor. He had never guided anyone through such an extended demonstration of precision shooting. The responsibility of maintaining proper conditions for Sarah's attempt weighed on him, understanding that any mistake in target placement or ammunition supply could affect the outcome. At 80 consecutive hits, Colonel Mitchell approached Rodriguez privately to discuss the implications of Sarah's performance. If she completed the full 100 targets, it would likely set a record that would be discussed throughout the Marine Corps and potentially influence future training programs. The final 20 shots loomed ahead as Sarah approached the most challenging phase of her attempt. Mental fatigue could become a factor even if physical techniques remained consistent. The pressure of being so close to an unprecedented achievement might affect concentration in ways that could cause mistakes. Rodriguez prepared for what would be the most crucial portion of Sarah's challenge, knowing that the entire crowd was focused on whether she could maintain her remarkable consistency for 20 more shots. The atmosphere had transformed from casual observation to intense focus on witnessing military history being made. As Sarah prepared for shot number 82-1, the stage was set for what would either be a triumphant completion of an impossible challenge or a dramatic demonstration of how quickly exceptional performance could change under pressure. The atmosphere around the rifle range had transformed completely from its casual training environment earlier in the day. What started as routine marksmanship instruction had evolved into something approaching a formal ceremony, with Marines standing in respectful silence as Sarah prepared for her 81st shot. The weight of expectation hung in the air like morning fog, thick and almost tangible. Rodriguez felt the pressure more acutely than Sarah appeared to. As the instructor who had initiated the challenge, he carried responsibility for maintaining optimal conditions, while the eyes of senior officers scrutinized every aspect of the demonstration. Colonel Mitchell's presence added official significance to what had begun as casual conversation between trainers. Sarah's preparation for shot 81 followed the same methodical process she had used throughout the challenge. Her breathing remained controlled, her stance consistent, and her focus unwavering. However, Rodriguez noticed subtle changes that suggested the cumulative effect of sustained concentration was beginning to register, even if Sarah seemed unaware of them. The rifle in her hands had fired 80 consecutive rounds, and while military weapons were designed for such use, Rodriguez monitored the barrel temperature and overall weapon condition carefully. Any change in the rifle's characteristics could affect accuracy through no fault of Sarah's technique, potentially ending her attempt due to equipment variables rather than shooting error. Master Sergeant Thompson positioned herself where she could observe Sarah's technique closely while remaining outside her peripheral vision. After years of training shooters, Thompson had developed an eye for the subtle signs that indicated when someone was approaching their limits. Sarah showed remarkable mental resilience, but Thompson watched for any indication that fatigue might be setting in. The 81st shot rang out across the range with the same sharp crack that had preceded it. The bullet struck the target center, maintaining the perfect streak that had captivated everyone present. Rodriguez called out the count in a voice that carried clearly across the silent crowd, and observers released breath they hadn't realized they were holding. Lieutenant Colonel Reeves continued documenting Sarah's performance, taking notes that would later become part of a formal report about innovative training methods. The analytical approach Sarah brought to marksmanship represented a different way of thinking about precision shooting that could potentially revolutionize how Marines learned these critical skills. As Sarah prepared for her 82nd shot, a new dynamic entered the equation. The crowd had grown large enough that their presence was becoming a factor in itself. While Sarah seemed immune to external distractions, the collective tension of nearly 100 observers created an atmosphere unlike anything typically seen during training. The shot struck home perfectly, adding to the growing sense that something truly historic was unfolding. Rodriguez found himself caught between admiration for Sarah's performance and anxiety about the pressure building around the demonstration. Every successful shot raised expectations higher while making the potential impact of any miss more significant. Media attention began arriving as word of the demonstration spread beyond Camp Pendleton. Military journalists who covered training innovations heard about the unusual challenge and requested permission to document the final portion of Sarah's attempt. Colonel Mitchell authorized limited media access, understanding that positive coverage of Marine training excellence could benefit the Corps. Sarah's 83rd shot continued her flawless performance, but Rodriguez noticed she was taking slightly more time between shots. Rather than indicating fatigue, this appeared to be a conscious adjustment to ensure she maintained the same level of precision that had characterized her earlier shots. Her analytical mind was making real-time corrections to account for any variables that might have changed. The ammunition supply required careful coordination as Sarah approached the final phases of her challenge. Each round was selected from the same production lot to ensure ballistic consistency, and Rodriguez personally inspected every cartridge before it was loaded. The attention to detail reflected the understanding that Sarah's performance deserved optimal support conditions. By the 85th consecutive hit, even the most experienced Marines present acknowledged they were witnessing something unprecedented. Combat veterans who had seen exceptional marksmanship under fire recognized that sustained precision under pressure required a unique combination of technical skill and mental strength that few people possessed. Sarah's focus seemed to intensify as she moved closer to her goal. Rather than showing signs of pressure, she appeared to enter an even deeper state of concentration. Her movements became more deliberate, and her preparation for each shot more thorough, as if she was consciously raising her standards as the stakes increased. The 86th shot struck the target's center with mechanical precision, continuing a streak that was defying statistical probability. Rodriguez began to understand that Sarah's success wasn't just about natural talent or analytical thinking, but represented a rare combination of mental and physical capabilities that created almost machine-like consistency. Observers from other military branches began arriving as news of the demonstration spread throughout the region. Air Force and Navy personnel stationed nearby requested permission to witness what was being described as a potentially record-setting performance. The interdisciplinary interest reflected recognition that exceptional marksmanship transcended individual service boundaries. Sarah's preparation for Shot 87 showed the same methodical approach she had maintained throughout the challenge, but Rodriguez detected a subtle shift in her demeanor. She seemed to be entering what athletes sometimes called the zone, a state of peak performance where conscious thought merged seamlessly with physical execution. The shot rang out and found its mark perfectly, adding to a demonstration that was challenging conventional understanding of what new recruits could achieve. Sarah had already exceeded the performance levels typically seen from Marines with years of experience, and she showed no signs of reaching her limits. Environmental conditions remained stable throughout the afternoon, with minimal wind and consistent lighting that supported accurate shooting. Rodriguez monitored weather reports carefully, understanding that any significant changes could affect bullet trajectory and potentially impact Sarah's performance, through no fault of her own. At 88 consecutive hits, the mathematical probability of Sarah's performance was becoming almost incomprehensible. Each successful shot represented not just individual accuracy, but the maintenance of perfect consistency over an extended period that tested both physical and mental endurance in ways that few challenges could match. Sarah's technique remained unchanged as she approached the final dozen shots of her challenge. Her stance, grip, breathing, and trigger control showed the same precision that had characterized her earlier shots. The repetitive nature of the task seemed to work in her favor, allowing her analytical mind to process each shot as an identical problem with a known solution. The crowd's tension became almost palpable as Sarah prepared for Shot 89. Rodriguez could feel the collective hope and anxiety of everyone present, all focused on whether this remarkable recruit could maintain her perfect performance for just a few more shots. The weight of so many expectations might have crushed other performers, but Sarah seemed insulated from external pressure by her intense concentration. The 89th shot struck the target center with the same precision that had marked its predecessors. Rodriguez's voice carried across the silent range as he confirmed another hit, and observers began to realize they were witnessing the final approach to what could be a historic achievement. Military photographers positioned themselves to capture the conclusion of Sarah's attempt, understanding that visual documentation would be essential for validating what many would find difficult to believe. The combination of military precision and human achievement created compelling imagery that would likely be remembered long after the demonstration concluded. As Sarah prepared for her 90th shot, Rodriguez found himself simultaneously hoping for her success and marveling at how a casual challenge had evolved into something of such significance. The recruit who had never held a firearm before that morning was now approaching a level of achievement that would be discussed throughout the Marine Corps for years to come. The 90th shot rang out across the range, striking the target center and maintaining the perfect streak that had captivated everyone present. 10 shots remained between Sarah and the completion of her unprecedented challenge, with the entire crowd focused on whether she could maintain her remarkable consistency through the final phase. Rodriguez prepared for what would be the most intense conclusion to any training demonstration he had ever supervised, knowing that Sarah's final 10 shots would determine whether this day would be remembered as a near miss or as one of the most remarkable achievements in Marine Corps training history. The rifle range had transformed into something resembling a cathedral, with over 150 Marines, officers, and observers maintaining absolute silence as Sarah prepared for shot number 91. The weight of collective expectation hung in the air like smoke from previous volleys, thick and charged with anticipation that seemed to make breathing more difficult for everyone except the quiet recruit at the firing line. Rodriguez felt sweat beading on his forehead despite the mild afternoon temperature. As the instructor who had initiated this challenge, he carried the burden of responsibility for its outcome. Every protocol had been followed meticulously, every piece of equipment checked and rechecked. Yet he understood that mechanical perfection could only provide the foundation for human achievement of this magnitude. Sarah's preparation ritual had evolved throughout the day into something approaching meditation. Her movements were economical and precise, wasting no energy on unnecessary actions while ensuring every detail received appropriate attention. The rifle in her hands might as well have been an extension of her body, so naturally did she manipulate its controls and align its sights. Colonel Mitchell stood with his senior staff at a respectful distance, their uniforms bearing the ribbons and insignia of careers spent in service to the Corps. These were men and women who had seen extraordinary performances under the most challenging conditions imaginable, yet none had witnessed anything quite like what was unfolding before them. The 91st shot broke the afternoon stillness with its sharp report. The bullet struck the target's center with mechanical precision, continuing a streak that had begun to seem almost supernatural in its consistency. Rodriguez's voice carried across the range as he confirmed another hit, and cameras clicked discreetly as photographers documented each moment of the historic attempt. Master Sergeant Thompson found herself reassessing everything she thought she knew about marksmanship training. Sarah's performance challenged conventional wisdom about the time and practice required to develop elite shooting skills. The analytical approach that characterized the recruit's method suggested that traditional training might benefit from incorporating more systematic thinking. As Sarah prepared for shot 92, environmental conditions remained nearly perfect for precision shooting. The afternoon sun provided consistent lighting, wind remained minimal, and temperature had stabilized at a level that supported optimal ballistic performance. Rodriguez monitored conditions constantly, understanding that external variables beyond anyone's control could influence the outcome. The 92nd shot rang out and found its mark with the same precision that had characterized its 91 predecessors. 8 shots remained between Sarah and the completion of her challenge, with each successive shot carrying increased significance as the mathematical improbability of her performance continued to grow. Lieutenant Colonel Reeves had filled several pages with observations about Sarah's technique and mental approach. The documentation would become part of a formal study examining how exceptional performance emerged from the intersection of natural ability, analytical thinking, and optimal training conditions. The implications for future marksmanship instruction could be revolutionary. Media representatives positioned themselves carefully to capture the conclusion without interfering with Sarah's concentration. Military journalists understood the significance of documenting what appeared to be a record-setting performance, while civilian reporters grasped the human interest angle of a complete beginner, achieving something that seasoned professionals rarely accomplished. Sarah's focus seemed to deepen as the count increased, rather than showing signs of pressure or fatigue. Her breathing remained controlled, her movements deliberate, and her preparation thorough. The analytical mindset that had served her well as a software developer was proving perfectly suited to the repetitive precision required for sustained marksmanship excellence. The 93rd shot struck the target center, adding to a demonstration that was redefining what observers thought possible from someone with no prior shooting experience. Rodriguez began to realize that Sarah's success represented more than individual achievement. It suggested new possibilities for how Marines might approach the development of critical skills. Ammunition management became increasingly critical as Sarah approached the final shots of her challenge. Each remaining round was selected with scientific precision, ensuring ballistic consistency that would eliminate equipment variables as potential factors in the outcome. The support crew understood their responsibility to maintain optimal conditions for Sarah's attempt. By the 94th consecutive hit, even the most skeptical observers had abandoned any doubt about Sarah's capabilities. Combat veterans who had witnessed exceptional marksmanship under fire acknowledged that sustained precision under pressure required abilities that went beyond normal human performance, into the realm of the extraordinary. Sarah's preparation for Shot 95 showed the same methodical approach she had maintained throughout the challenge, but Rodriguez detected subtle changes that suggested she was entering an even deeper state of concentration. Her movements became more fluid, and her connection with the rifle seemed to reach an almost symbiotic level. The 95th shot rang out across the now silent base, striking the target center with mechanical precision that continued to defy statistical probability. 5 shots remained between Sarah and the completion of her unprecedented challenge, with the entire crowd focused on whether she could maintain perfect consistency through the final phase. Environmental monitoring showed conditions remained stable, with minimal atmospheric changes that might affect bullet trajectory. Rodriguez coordinated with range safety personnel to ensure optimal conditions were maintained throughout the conclusion of Sarah's attempt, understanding that external variables could influence outcomes despite perfect shooting technique. The crowd's tension reached almost unbearable levels as Sarah prepared for Shot 96. Rodriguez could feel the collective anxiety and hope of everyone present, all focused on this remarkable recruit, who had transformed a casual challenge into a demonstration that would be remembered throughout Marine Corps history. Sarah's 96th shot struck the target center with the same precision that had characterized its predecessors, continuing a performance that challenged conventional understanding of human capabilities under pressure. 4 shots remained, and observers began to realize they were witnessing the final approach to something truly historic. Military photographers adjusted their positions to capture the climactic moments of Sarah's attempt, understanding that visual documentation would be essential for validating what many would find difficult to believe. The combination of military excellence and human achievement created compelling imagery that transcended typical training documentation. As Sarah prepared for Shot 97, Rodriguez found himself marveling at how completely the afternoon had diverged from routine training expectations. The recruit who had never held a firearm before that morning was now approaching a level of achievement that would establish new benchmarks for marksmanship excellence. The 97th shot rang out and found its mark perfectly, maintaining the flawless streak that had captivated everyone present. 3 shots remained between Sarah and the completion of her challenge, with each successive shot carrying the weight of history as observers realized they were witnessing something unprecedented. Colonel Mitchell stepped closer to observe the final shots personally, his presence adding official recognition to what had evolved from casual challenge into formal demonstration. The implications of Sarah's performance would extend beyond individual achievement to influence training methodologies throughout the Marine Corps. Sarah's preparation for Shot 98 seemed to intensify her concentration even further, as if she was consciously raising her standards as the stakes increased. Her analytical mind appeared to be processing each remaining shot as a critical component in a larger equation that would determine the success or failure of her entire attempt. The 98th shot struck the target center with mechanical precision, continuing a demonstration that had redefined what observers thought possible from human performance under pressure. 2 shots remained, and the entire crowd held its breath as Sarah approached the conclusion of her remarkable challenge. Rodriguez prepared to supervise the final 2 shots that would determine whether this day would be remembered as one of the most extraordinary achievements in Marine Corps training history or as a near miss that came tantalizingly close to perfection. The weight of those final moments settled over the range like gathering storm clouds, heavy with potential and charged with anticipation. The entire Marine Corps base seemed to have fallen under a spell of absolute silence as Sarah Chen prepared for shot number 96. Even the distant sounds of other training activities had ceased, as if the entire installation was holding its breath in anticipation of what would happen in the next few minutes. The weight of history pressed down on the rifle range like a physical force that everyone present could feel. Rodriguez had supervised thousands of training exercises during his career, but nothing had prepared him for the intensity of this moment. His hands trembled slightly as he prepared the 99th target, understanding that his role in maintaining optimal conditions could influence the outcome of something that would be discussed in Marine Corps circles for decades to come. Sarah's concentration had reached levels that seemed almost supernatural. Her preparation for each shot had evolved throughout the day into a ritual of mechanical precision that eliminated all variables except the essential elements of marksmanship. She seemed to exist in a bubble of perfect focus that insulated her from the crushing expectations of everyone watching. Colonel Mitchell found himself reflecting on the randomness of how extraordinary moments emerged from ordinary circumstances. This morning's routine training had transformed into something that challenged his understanding of human potential and military excellence. The recruit preparing for her 99th shot represented possibilities he had never considered. The rifle in Sarah's hands had fired 98 consecutive rounds, with perfect results. A performance that defied statistical probability and challenged conventional wisdom about what was achievable without extensive experience. Each successful shot had raised the stakes while making the potential impact of any miss more devastating. Master Sergeant Thompson stood transfixed as she watched Sarah's preparation routine. After training thousands of Marines, she had developed intuitive understanding of when shooters were approaching their limits. Sarah showed no signs of fatigue, pressure, or decreased concentration, as if the challenge energized rather than drained her. The 99th shot would be the most crucial single pull of a trigger in anyone's memory at Camp Pendleton. Success would bring Sarah within one shot of completing something unprecedented, while failure would end a demonstration that had captivated an entire military installation and redefined what observers thought possible. Environmental conditions remained perfect for precision shooting, with stable lighting, minimal wind, and consistent temperature that supported optimal ballistic performance. Rodriguez had monitored weather reports continuously throughout the afternoon, understanding that external variables could influence outcomes despite flawless technique. Sarah's breathing technique had refined itself throughout the challenge into something approaching meditation. Each breath was controlled and purposeful, providing the physiological foundation for the mental focus required to maintain perfect consistency under intense pressure. Her analytical mind had optimized every aspect of her performance. The crowd of observers had grown to include representatives from multiple military branches, media personnel, and base personnel who understood they were witnessing something that might never be repeated. Cell phone cameras captured every moment, though few believed the recordings would adequately convey the tension and significance of the demonstration. As Sarah aligned her sights for shot 99, the collective tension of nearly 200 observers became almost unbearable. Rodriguez could feel their hopes and anxieties pressing against him like a physical weight, all focused on whether this remarkable recruit could maintain her perfect performance for 2 more shots. The rifle's report echoed across the silent base with sharp finality. For a moment, that seemed to stretch into eternity. Everyone waited for confirmation of the result. Through his binoculars, Rodriguez could see the neat hole punched through the target center, exactly where 98 previous shots had found their mark. "Hit number 99, Rodriguez called out, his voice carrying clearly across the hushed crowd. The confirmation triggered a wave of barely contained excitement among the observers, though protocol demanded continued silence until Sarah completed her attempt. 1 shot remained between Sarah Chen and the completion of something that would establish a new benchmark for marksmanship excellence at Camp Pendleton. The mathematical improbability of her performance had transcended mere shooting skill to become something approaching the miraculous in its consistency. Sarah's preparation for the final shot seemed to intensify her concentration beyond anything observers had seen throughout the day. She took additional time checking her equipment, ensuring optimal sight alignment, and controlling her breathing with the precision of someone who understood the historic significance of the moment. The target for shot 100 was positioned with scientific precision at exactly 100 yards, the same distance that had challenged Sarah throughout her attempt. The white circle with its black bullseye seemed to mock the difficulty of what she was attempting. A small target that demanded perfect accuracy from a rifle fired by human hands. Lieutenant Colonel Reeves found herself mentally composing the report she would submit about this unprecedented demonstration. The implications for Marine Corps training methodology could be revolutionary if Sarah's analytical approach could be taught to other recruits. Her success suggested new possibilities for how technical skills might be developed. Media representatives adjusted their camera angles to capture the climactic moment, understanding that visual documentation would be essential for validating what many would find impossible to believe. The image of a recruit achieving something that seasoned Marines rarely accomplished would become iconic. Rodriguez felt the weight of his role as he prepared to supervise the shot that would determine whether Sarah's challenge ended in triumph or near miss. Every protocol had been followed perfectly, every detail managed with military precision, yet the outcome depended entirely on human performance under ultimate pressure. The ammunition for shot 100 was selected from the same lot that had provided consistent ballistic performance throughout Sarah's attempt. Rodriguez personally inspected the cartridge, ensuring it met the same specifications that had supported her previous 96 sensible shots. No equipment variable would influence this final moment. Sarah's stance for the final shot showed the same technical precision that had characterized her entire performance. But observers could sense something different in her demeanor. She seemed to have entered a state of absolute calm that transcended the pressure of the moment and the expectations of everyone watching. Colonel Mitchell positioned himself where he could observe both Sarah's technique and the target impact, understanding that his presence added official validation to what was unfolding. The implications of her success would extend throughout the Marine Corps and potentially influence training programs across all military branches. The range had achieved absolute silence as Sarah made her final preparations. Even the wind seemed to have stilled, as if nature itself was holding its breath to witness the conclusion of this extraordinary demonstration. 200 people focused their complete attention on one recruit and one rifle and one target. Sarah's breathing slowed to the controlled rhythm she had maintained throughout the challenge. Her sight alignment was perfect, her trigger finger positioned optimally, and her mental focus had reached levels that eliminated all distractions. The analytical mind that had served her as a software developer was about to face its ultimate test. The final shot rang out across Camp Pendleton with the same sharp crack that had preceded 99 others. The bullet traveled the 100 yards to its target in a fraction of a second that seemed to last forever, carrying with it the hopes and expectations of everyone who had witnessed Sarah's remarkable performance. Rodriguez raised his binoculars, with hands that trembled despite his years of military experience. Through the magnified view he could see the target clearly, the white paper marked by exactly 100 holes clustered in the center ring. The final shot had struck home with the same precision that had characterized its predecessors. "Hit number 100, Rodriguez announced, his voice breaking slightly with emotion. 100 consecutive hits. The explosion of cheers and applause that followed seemed to shake the entire base. Marines who had served in combat zones and witnessed extraordinary courage under fire cheered as loudly as recruits experiencing their first taste of military excellence. Sarah Chen had achieved something that would be remembered throughout Marine Corps history. Colonel Mitchell approached Sarah as she safed her rifle and stepped back from the firing line. The base commander's face showed the kind of respect typically reserved for decorated veterans rather than recruits in their first weeks of training. "Outstanding performance, Marine," Mitchell said, using the title that Sarah had not yet officially earned but had certainly demonstrated she deserved. "What you accomplished today will be talked about in the Corps for decades." Sarah's response was characteristically analytical. The variables aligned favorably, and the systematic approach proved effective for maintaining consistency under pressure. Her matter-of-fact assessment of an achievement that had stunned everyone present perfectly captured the mindset that had made her success possible. To Sarah, hitting 100 consecutive targets had been an engineering problem that required systematic solution rather than a superhuman feat requiring extraordinary talent. Master Sergeant Thompson approached with the official documentation that would record Sarah's achievement for Marine Corps history. 100 consecutive hits by a recruit with no prior shooting experience was unprecedented and would likely remain unmatched for generations. The implications of Sarah's performance extended far beyond individual achievement. Her analytical approach to marksmanship suggested new possibilities for training methodologies that could improve performance across the entire Marine Corps. The systematic thinking that had served her as a programmer had revolutionized her approach to precision shooting. As the crowd began to disperse and normal base activities resumed, Rodriguez reflected on how completely the day had diverged from routine expectations. A casual challenge had evolved into something historic, demonstrating that extraordinary moments could emerge from the most ordinary circumstances when exceptional individuals encountered optimal conditions. Sarah Chen's name would be remembered at Camp Pendleton long after she completed her training and moved on to her military career. The recruit who had never held a firearm before that morning had achieved something that established new benchmarks for human performance under pressure, proving that analytical thinking and systematic approach could overcome seemingly impossible challenges. The rifle range returned to its normal training functions, but everyone who had witnessed Sarah's remarkable demonstration understood they had seen something that would never be forgotten. 100 consecutive hits represented more than marksmanship excellence. It demonstrated the extraordinary potential that could emerge when human capability met optimal conditions and unwavering determination. As the sun began to set over Camp Pendleton, Sarah Chen had transformed from an unknown recruit into a Marine Corps legend, her achievement destined to inspire future generations of Marines who would hear the story of the software developer who proved that precision, analysis, and determination could accomplish the impossible.